Uganda wants to pass an anti-gay law, and now the U.S. is threatening them with possible sanctions. Gee, U.S. should really mind their own business. But LGBTQ equals votes, so here we go. The White House has warned Uganda of possible sanctions if the newly passed anti-gay bill becomes effective. Ugandan lawmakers on Tuesday passed into law the stricter anti-gay bill, which outlined harsher punishment for people who engage in same-sex activities. Penalties under the new legislation include a 30-year jail time for anyone who engages in same-sex relations or identifies as LGBTQ. There was very little opposition to the bill in Parliament. But wait a minute, very little opposition, so that means the politicians that were elected by the people, so the voice of the people is against homosexuality? The bill has majority members backing the controversial legislation. The new law has been condemned by the international community, of course, because they're all pro-LGBTQ, because it's votes and division, including the United States, the UK, and other European nations. U.S. Secretary of State said in a statement that the anti-homosexual act passed by the Ugandan parliament yesterday would undermine fundamental human rights of all Ugandans, not all Ugandans, just the minority, and could reverse gains in the fight against HIV and AIDS. How does that bill reverse gains in the fight against HIV and AIDS? I'm reminded of monkeypox. It affected one half of a certain group. I don't get it. We urge the Ugandan government to strongly reconsider the implementation of this legislation. On Wednesday, the National Security Council spokesman John Kirby told journalists Uganda could face some sanctions. Uganda is an independent country. If the majority of parliament, i.e. the will of the people, is against homosexuality, the US, the European Union, or whatever other nation has no right to tell them what to do. In my opinion, if you don't like the laws in Uganda, you can either try to change them by swaying people's opinion or running for office, or you can just move to another country. I mean, there are plenty of countries who will take you, because you check all the boxes. Okay, so what does this bill entail? A person who is convicted of grooming or trafficking children for the purpose of engaging them in homosexual acts faces life imprisonment. I would add heterosexual acts too, because it's a child. But other than that, I agree with that part of the bill. Individuals or institutions which support or fund LGBT whatever rights, activists, or organizations or publish, broadcast, or distribute pro-gay media material also face prosecution and imprisonment. Media groups, journalists, and publishers face prosecution and imprisonment for publishing, broadcasting, distribution of any content that advocates for gay rights or promotes homosexuality. So when I think of that, I think of Drag Queen Story Hour. They basically shove it down the children's throat. So on the one hand, I'm against it because if you're promoting it to children, that's not good because children shouldn't be sexualized. On the other hand, if it's directed towards adults, well, adults are adults. They can make their own decision. But that's not how it's going in the West. In the West, it's strictly directed towards children, in my opinion anyway. So maybe the Ugandan government looks at what's happening in the West and they're like, you know what? We don't want to subjugate our kids to this stuff. Let's not follow their lead. Death penalty for what is described as aggravated homosexuality, that is, sexual abuse of a child, a person with disabilities, or vulnerable people. Yeah, if you say a child, yeah, you should get the death penalty. Or a disabled person, I don't see anything wrong with that. In cases where a victim of homosexual assault is infected with a lifelong disease. Yeah, you should get the death penalty. Property owners also face risk of being jailed if their premises are used as a brothel for homosexual acts. So at the bottom of the article here it says homophobia is already rife in Uganda. So I know rife doesn't necessarily mean majority of the population, but I guess the politicians seem to think so. And the president has described homosexuals as disgusting. Again, if the majority of Ugandans are anti-LGBT whatever, then it's their nation, it's their decision. I mean, here in the West, I've heard stories of parents transitioning their kids to the opposite gender, which I find is pretty sad, because that'll mess the kids up for life. And the LGBTQ is pro-trans, so anyway, that's it for my little ramble. Take care.